It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Hello, this is Dr. Justin Coulson, the founder of happyfamilies.com.au. Welcome to another episode of the Happy Families podcast. Mother's Day, it's just around the corner, and I don't know if you have the same sensitivity, the same awareness that I guess, been experiencing increasingly over the last handful of years. I'm seeing more and more of my friends who are no longer fortunate enough to have both of their parents alive. That may be the case for you as well. And maybe you've even lost one of your parents. More than that, though, I'm becoming particularly mindful that Mother's Day as an idea, and even Father's Day, and all of these other days of celebration that we have in our calendar, they're not always wonderful for everybody. In fact, Mother's Day for a lot of people is a real challenge. And there's this delicate balance where we're trying to say, let's celebrate Mum because it's Mother's Day this weekend, but let's also be mindful that not everybody is able to celebrate because their mum may have passed away, or because the kids may not have their mum available to them, may not be accessible. Maybe they're in the foster care system. Maybe, I don't know, maybe mum's in jail and the kids are being raised by parents, or grandparents, I should say. There's so many different circumstances. And so as much as I want to jump onto social media and say, Happy Mother's Day, it's going to be a great weekend, go out and love your family and be all over mum, there's that part of me that kind of thinks I almost need to be apologetic about it. I don't know if apologetic's the right word, but I really want to be sensitive at a time of genuine pain, distress, and sadness for so many people. To have a conversation with me about how we can be sensitive, and also what we can do if our family is one of those families that requires that sensitivity. I'm joined by Kristy Thomas. Kristy joined me a little while ago on the Happy Families podcast. She's from an organisation called Feel the Magic. You can find out all about Feel the Magic at feelthemagic.org.au. They're an Australian charity providing early intervention grief education programs for kids between 7 to 18 who are experiencing pain and isolation due to the death of a parent or a guardian or a sibling. Kristy, thanks for joining me as we move towards Mother's Day. This must be a tough time for so many of the families that you deal with.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's a sensitive time, like you said. It's a time for them where it's not when they don't want to celebrate, it's just how do we do that? How do we now do that when our mother is gone?
I'm imagining that people with the very best of intentions will say to a child who has lost a parent, a mother in this case, as we move towards Mother's Day, they must say some things that are meant to be helpful but must just be so painful. We're having this conversation on Zoom. Our podcast listeners obviously can't see your face, but as I said that, you had this really gentle, it was a kind eye roll, but you rolled your eyes, you were like, oh yeah, there are some painful things that are said by well-meaning people.
Yeah, absolutely. And well-meaning, mostly because I deal with a lot of children, well-meaning children. Now, children are really inquisitive as well, and so they ask questions that can be really uncomfortable. So the eye roll was really based around the moments that kids have shared with me that are really hurtful and painful, like, why are you buying a present for your mum if you don't have one?
Oh.
Why are that is such a simple question. That child is probably genuinely interested to know. And what we want to do is equip the child who is buying the present, who doesn't have a mum, with either a statement to reply with that they feel comfortable with, or just the courage to brush it off and build that resilience in them. Because, there's a lot of well-meaning kids around, and thankfully adults are getting better. I feel that they've got much more sensitivity around these things. And so it's really about equipping the kids to feel like they're strong enough to cope during school and within communities, like just simple things like when they go to sports, they see other kids with their mums. That can be quite painful too.
Kristy, at this time of year, we've got Mother's Day stalls. There's, especially in the younger years, kids are doing Mother's Day craft and that kind of thing. They're putting together cards for their mums. If we've got a child who is not able to access their mum, either through death and bereavement or through other circumstances like foster care or imprisonment, those sorts of issues, or just a mum who's not functional and so the kids are living with grandparents or aunties or uncles, how do we help them to navigate that? Let's say we've got some Happy Families listeners who are literally dealing with that today. What are the kinds of things that parents and other caregivers can say to help their kids through what must be one of the trickiest weeks of the calendar?
I think the number one thing, the priority would be keeping the communication open between the caregiver and the child, and helping, like making a conversation about helping the child to decide and have input into what they're going to do for that day. So future planning really supports their anxiety and sadness or grief leading into it. So if they've got a plan for what they're actually going to do on that day, that can be really helpful for the child, and including them in the decision making, and also knowing that that might change from year to year, and all of those plans might fall out the door on the day.
I'm imagining a scenario. I'm not imagining it too deeply because I would hate for it to happen. But here I am, a single dad. If Kylie wasn't with me and I had kids that were heading off to school to participate in these activities, what do I say? Like literally, what do I say to my 9-year-old daughter when she's going to school knowing that this is coming, that these craft things are happening?
And number one would be to acknowledge that it's going to be hard, or that it might bring up sadness, or that it could be quite upsetting. Acknowledging that pre going into it. I think it's great to have a conversation with the teacher, if you haven't already, about how they're going to navigate the Mother's Day craft, and then possibly just talking to your 9-year-old about, okay, well, you don't have mummy, but maybe you could make something for mummy anyway and write some kind of special memory on whatever the craft is. Or is there someone else special in your life that you might like to gift that to?
Yeah, so I guess you can still commemorate Mum even if she's not here. We can go and visit her gravestone or wherever her ashes have been laid, or something like that. So you've still got that capacity. And like you said, it's the validation. Today's probably going to be really tough. We all miss Mum like mad.
Yeah. And what's going to help you to feel better? And, really put it in their court to say, actually, I don't want to participate in the Mother's Day craft, and then talking to the school about that. Or, yeah, that sounds good, but maybe when we get home we can watch my favourite movie so I can feel better. Yeah. Kids are really good at knowing what they need if they're given the opportunity and asked the question.
Yeah, I'm tempted to just remind parents at this point that avoidance reinforces anxiety, and it's really great if you can get your kids to push through things. But I also want to highlight how contextual that is. Like, if this is something that's just occurred in your home, then avoidance is probably okay right now. Or if your child is particularly young or is particularly sensitive or has specific anxieties and challenges, sometimes it's okay to just say, you know what, you don't have to go to school for the next 3 days. We're just going to have a really quiet time at home.
I agree. I mean, I would never suggest let's not go to school, but I think that's perfect. And even if it was 5 years ago, that doesn't mean that child's not going to have big emotions around it, especially when you put it in context with whatever else is going on in their life at that time. So always empowering them to make the choice, I think, is always going to be a success versus avoidance or just not communicating about it at all.
I'm speaking with Kristy Thomas. Kristy is the founder of feelthemagic.org.au, an Aussie charity that provides grief education programs for our kids who are experiencing the sadness and the pain and the difficulties that come from the death of a parent or a guardian or a sibling. And with Mother's Day just around the corner, obviously it can be a sensitive time. Kristy, what about the situation where you've got, like in my family, Kylie and I are both together, we've got our kids or with us, how do we help them, from your experience with working with so many families, how do we help them to be sensitive to the reality that not every single person in their school, in their class, is going to be in the same really fortunate situation that they are in?
Well, I've interviewed a few kids on, what is it that they need? What would have helped them? And these were teens, so we're talking about when they were younger. And one of the key things that all of them said was, I just want my friends and family to acknowledge that they exist, ask me about my loved one, and not avoid the fact that they're not here. So if your children, for instance, know of someone or have a friend who may have a mum missing at this time, is to say, hey, this must be a hard day for you. Just that acknowledgement again. Maybe you could tell me what your mum's name is if you feel comfortable, or what was your favourite thing that you ever did with them, or Can you remember a time that you absolutely loved being with them? Things like that can really just, one, acknowledge that they existed, and people are scared to bring up someone who's missing because they think, oh, I don't want to bring it to light. I don't want to upset them. But the thing is, it sits there with them all the time. But when you ask them a question that's share something positive, they love to share about their loved one. They love to do that. So if given an opportunity, just ask questions.
Would you say that it's the same for kids who are experiencing a non-permanent loss? So obviously death provides us this opportunity to really celebrate the person who's no longer with us. But if we're talking about somebody who's dysfunctional and therefore the kids have been taken away, or we're talking about somebody who is in circumstances where their freedoms have been taken, they're in prison, for example, this is a really different kind of conversation, I would imagine. You wouldn't just say, hey, tell me something about your mum that's fantastic, given that this child might have been really traumatized with that background.
Yeah, so then you could ask your friend, oh, this must be a tough day for you. Is there anything I can do to help you? Or is there something we could do together that would make you feel better? Or just being a friend, just being there, acknowledging them. Because you're right, it's not always a positive experience if their mother is missing due to other circumstances. So
yeah. So Kristy, I remember from our last conversation, there's a surprisingly high percentage of kids who are being raised in families where they have lost a parent.
It's 1 in 20 lost a parent by the time they're 18.
There's a lot of families who will be listening to this who are affected.
Yeah. And, if you look at any average school, then that would be 1 in every class.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's talking about sibling loss and or guardian loss, stepdads, or often children being raised by grandparents. So, yeah.
Do you have any other resources for families who would like more information to get access to some scripts or something to read or something that they can sit down with the kids and just go through?
Absolutely. We have on the website, we have a place called the Grief Resource Hub. There's quite a few downloads you can access around speaking to all different ages around grief, but specifically for Mother's Day, we do have a download, How to Talk to My Child About Mother's Day approaching if they're grieving the loss of their mum. And then there's also a beautiful download where we've interviewed kids about what they would love on Mother's Day, and it's just got some tips and tricks in there around how to spend Mother's Day with them, like creating memorials or buying a present, writing cards, those types of things.
Kristy Thomas from feelthemagic.org.au. Really appreciate you having a conversation about something that's kind of tricky at such a sensitive time of the year.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Okay, all those details again will be in our show notes, but it's feelthemagic.org.au. And as Kristy mentioned, there is on the resources tab a grief resource hub with everything that you need if this is something that's sadly relevant for your family. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media with Craig Bruce as our executive producer. For more information about how to support and make your family happier, regardless of your circumstances, please visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.